Good morning, everyone. This is today's focus for Friday, November the 11th, 2022 at 10:02 a.m. Central Time. Today's focus, fighting over words. Fighting over words. How much time do you spend in your life arguing and fighting with people over words? How much time do you spend fighting and arguing with people on social media, fighting and arguing with maybe a family member, with friends, fighting and arguing? And here's the real question. When it's all said and done, all of the arguing, all of the fighting over words, when it's all said and done, what did anyone gain? What profit was gained from all of the arguing and all of the striving over words? Now, the reason that is today's focus is because I was looking at 2 Timothy chapter 2, 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14. I'm going to read the verse, but we're going to take one phrase from it, and that's what I want you to focus on today, all right? Today's focus, 2 Timothy 2:14, and here's the exact phrase. Are you ready? Of these things, put them in remembrance, charging them. So Paul wants Timothy to put them in remembrance and charging them, all right? Warn them, all right? He wants to warn them. And here's what he wants the people to be warned about. All right, warn them before the Lord that they strive not about words to no profit. They don't strive about words to no profit. I want you to think about that phrase. I want you to think about what it means. And most importantly, I want you to think about what it means for your life. Now, we're going to read this in a number of translations, but I think we have to just offer another warning here. People are being warned, don't strive about words to no profit. That's the warning, but I think we have to add an additional warning here because I think some Christians will say, well, then we don't need to argue about anything. In other words, we don't need to argue about any theological issues because if you think about theological issues, they almost always come down to words and the meaning of words. I mean, the early church was fighting over two Greek words that basically the only difference between them was one Greek letter. One's dealing with the fact of Christ being of the same essence of the Father, and the other Greek word indicating that Christ was of a similar substance. That really divided Christianity. It was a major issue in the early church. They were fighting over basically two Greek words, and the only difference between these two Greek words was one letter. You would say, well, they were just striving about words, but they were striving about words, but it was of great significance because you're dealing with the very essence of who Christ is, his nature, and how he relates to the Father. So that's very, 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 very important. Let me read 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 14, and a number of translations. So I just want to make sure we realize, obviously, we have to fight about words sometimes. Think of theology is so many words, right? Words like depravity, words like imputation, propitiation, imputed, all the different words that we talk about in theology. We do a lot of striving over words. So how do we understand this? Well, let's look at 2 Timothy 2:14 and a number of translations just to see how they handle this. All right, 2 Timothy 2:14. Keep reminding God's people of these things. Warn them before God against quarreling about words. It is of no value. Now, what caught my attention is this is like, warn them before God. So this is not just something that we just take lightly. Paul wanted Timothy to warn the people before God. This is a serious warning. Stop arguing about words, which is of no value, no profit. Stop arguing about words. Wow. What do we do with that? It's the New Living Translation. Remind everyone about these things and command them in God's presence. So some translations go with the idea of warning. Others go, you're commanding them in God's presence. Stop fighting over words. Such arguments are useless. ESV, remind them of these things and charge them before God not to quarrel about words. Berean Standard Bible, remind the believers of these things, charging them before God to avoid quarreling over words. I think all of them go basically with that same idea. The Amplify says this: remind the people of these facts and solemnly charge them in the presence of God to avoid petty controversy over words, which does no good. Now we as believers in 2022, just look at our world. Our world is constantly fighting. I mean, that if you want to describe our culture, especially on social media, it's fighting and fighting and arguing and arguing and fighting and arguing and arguing and fighting and arguing and arguing and arguing and arguing. And sometimes you're like, what did anyone accomplish over that? But how do we understand it from a Christian perspective? Because I just believe Christian history has been a lot of fighting over words, quarreling over words. So what do we do? Well, let's look at just a couple of commentaries really quick. See if they offer something tangible, something that we can grab a hold of today. But remember, the goal here is just to place this before you. Look, the whole thing with today's focus is I'm placing these concepts before you. I'm still waiting for all of the emails in regards to kind of the hypothesis I put forward about Proverbs 31, right? I think a more conversation needs to happen about that. So a lot of these, I'm just kind of placing them. Discernment. I did get a lot of emails about discernment, and people had some great questions about that. So we may need to come back to this. But here, if you want to talk about discernment, we have to be able to discern here exactly what this means so that we don't misuse it. Because I think some people are like, oh, you're just over there fighting over those theological terms. It doesn't matter. I mean, 2 Timothy 2:14 tells you not to do that. And I would argue, no, sometimes we've got to fight over words, but clearly there's times that we shouldn't. How do we understand this? All right. I'm going to just look at a couple of commentaries here. All right. This is how one says it. And all. Okay. Timothy's solemn address to his flock. He is, St. Paul reminds him, charging his people before the Lord, a very earnest, solemn thought for every public teacher. So we are that this is something that we all should be reminded of, that when we preach or teach, in a sense, we're charging the people before God. And I think that's true, all right? But here is what he wants them to understand, that there was a grave danger that such empty, profitless disputes about words and expressions, which we know occupied the attention of many of the Ephesian so-called Christian teachers, would end in distracting the minds of the members of these several congregations, who would naturally take their tone in matters connected with religious life from their teachers, and thus words would soon come to be substituted for acts in the lives of those men and women called by the name of Christ in Ephesus. Now that's interesting. This seems to be going with the idea that what could happen, that the people could become so preoccupied with fighting about words that that basically becomes their preoccupation. In other words, the focus becomes about words instead of living out their Christian life. Like they're over here, we're going to fight about this word and this word and this word and this word, but we're going to just live our life any way we want. So words takes precedence over Christian living. Now, I think this can be a problem in certain churches. I'll just speak of the Reformed world, right, where I would fit in. I think sometimes those who are Reformed wants to constantly fight over words. And I understand it's important to fight over theological words, but those cannot become all we're doing is fighting over words and arguing and condemning this person and condemning this person and condemning this person and not looking at just living out our Christian life in a meaningful way. So words take precedent. Okay, is that what's being said here? That's an interesting approach to the subject. They go on to say, Well, all right. There's more they say here, but I'm gonna try to focus on the ones that are really going in with what we're looking at. It says strive about words. They talk about the Greek word a little bit. We haven't had a chance to look that up here. Maybe you can do that today. Useful for nothing, serving no good purpose. All right. I think the idea here is not to strive about words for nothing. In other words, if you're striving about words, there has to be profit in it. So I don't think it's the idea. I don't think the idea is to never strive over words. Again, I'm going to read it from a different translation. Charge them before God not to fight about words. But see, this one, it depends on the translation. See, some say don't fight about words because it's useless. That kind of changes the meaning. What I'm thinking is this: is it giving me the idea? Don't fight over words that are useless, that is pointless. Like there's a time you fight over words and it's acceptable because it's not useless. It's with profit. And there's times you can be fighting over words that isn't of any value. So does that mean we only fight over those things that we consider to be valuable? Or does it mean, and I think that I can definitely understand this. Look, there's sometimes people will email me. There's sometimes people will try to engage me in an argument or a debate, and usually relatively quick, I can determine, is this someone who really wants to learn and understand, or is it someone just trying to make a point? Or sometimes in the middle of the argument, they'll be almost acting like they're doing me a favor. And I'm like, oh, so why didn't you just start off by saying, I'm going to show you how you should think? Because if you start off and I'm thinking, okay, we're going back and forth, but you're really trying to teach me something, then you just need to say, listen, I'm going to send you an email because I need to teach you. All right, well, then I can just read the email and be done. Like, there's no point in going back and forth if you've already made up your mind and I've already made up my mind and we're not going to listen to each other. That is of no profit or value. So it wouldn't matter what value the words had. There's no way that conversation is going to be profitable. But if you got two people who are willing to listen, even if there's strong disagreement, I think there can be great value in that because both are listening and considering the other perspective. So is it just don't ever fight over words because that's how some translations seem to have it. Don't fight over words, period. It's useless. Right? Others like, and in fact, the King James, let me see how the King James reads again, because I read so many different translations, says okay, let me read. Charge them before the Lord that they strive not about words to no profit. So the King James seems to add, or at least the way I read it, is don't strive about words that lead to no profit, where others are like, don't strive over words because it is of no value. It never is of any value. But I think that that's only true depending on who I'm striving with. Because what I like is to consider that when someone has a disagreement, that we are then going to strive together to find the truth. But the minute I realize that the person is not interested in the truth, that they've already made up their mind, well, then I typically am like, I'm done with this conversation. I'm done. You just go argue with someone else. I don't care. You've already got up your mind. I mean, there's no point. If we can work together, there's value. So is it about the words that we're fighting over? Or is it about how we fight? Is it about who we are arguing or striving with? What exactly are we to do with this today? I'm going to try to pull up one more commentary because we're fast approaching the 15-minute mark, which is our goal here for this podcast series. See, they offer nothing there. Some of these commentaries really don't offer anything. Wow. Okay, that they strive not about words to no profit, that they spend not their time and their pulpits and in contest about words which tend to no solid advantage of their hearers. That doesn't really explain what what we're not to do, that they strive not about words. It became them to strive and contend for the form of sound words, for the wholesome words of doctrine of our Lord Jesus, but not about mere words, and especially such as were to no profit. So we are to strive about certain words, wholesome words, but not mere words. So here, that commentary is trying to draw a distinction between the kind of words we strive about. What does it mean not to strive about words, to fight over words? What do you think it means? Now, well, there's another phrase there at the end of that verse. I think we can always start here. When we start fighting over words, I'm just going to throw a couple of thoughts here really quick. Why are we fighting over the words? I think that's important. Why? Because sometimes it's personal. And what do I mean by that? Sometimes your ego gets in the way. Oh, you disagree with me? I'm going to prove you're wrong. It becomes like a personal competition. I can't speak for women, but I know men, it turns into that. Egos get involved. It becomes about pride. It becomes about proving you wrong. No. That's the wrong kind of striving for words. And that is of no profit, because all you're doing is going to puff your own self up and exalt your own self up and make you feel like you're right. That's of no value. So I think we have to ask ourselves why we're striving. Second, I think we have to consider how we are striving. If you're striving to prove someone wrong instead of saying, let's work together to find truth, then that's of no value. And then I think you have to ask, so I think it's why, I think it's how, and I think it's what is the conclusion? What's the end? Is this going to end with someone profiting, or is this going to end with just nothing? Nothing good is going to come from it. Why are we striving? How are we striving? And what is the end of our striving? You can tell me what you think. You can tell me what you think. And I know, I don't want this to turn into us striving or fighting over the words of 2 Timothy 2:14. Do you know of any good cross references that would go with 2:14 about not strive not about words to no profit? Do you know of any good cross references? Do you know any good cross references? If you do, let me know. All right, we'll stop. We went 18 minutes. All right, you can contact me, newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. And please don't email me and strive over the fact, well, you should have gone longer. Today's focus is to give you one thing, just to present it to you so that you have something to focus on. In many cases, what we talk about here may show up in another podcast where we go more in depth, or in a sermon or somewhere else. So it's not that we forget these things, but we try to place them there so that it's quick and you can get something to think about for your day. So that is today's focus for Friday, November the 11th, 2022.